Such a pleasure to be here. It has been a great discussion all day. There's one thing after another. A lot of it has been very heavy and very challenging. I want to remind people what an amazing time this is. This is an amazing time for the United States of America because here it is trying to compete in the global economy, and what could be more exciting than having a population that's connected across the globe through language, through kinship, through relationships, through culture. We have a democracy that is clearly vulnerable and under attack. But the other side of it is an opportunity to finally have a democracy that lives up to its promise. We talk about government of the people, by the people, and for the people, but never have we been serious about it. Never have we sought to include all the people. And now, because of the shifting demographics, because of the way that the population has changed, we're in a situation in which the only democracy... Really? You didn't hear a thing I said? The only way that democracy is going to thrive is if we have a thriving multiracial democracy. A thriving multiracial democracy that is radically inclusive so that we know that nobody is being left out, that is absolutely in service of human flourishing, that can lead to a good life. And when we think about that, it's so challenging because it's hard for people to see the brightness of what could be ahead. And that all that we're talking about really is all. But to get there, we've got to do something that I often think of, Starsky, as applying the curb cut effect. Those curb cuts in the sidewalk that are there because of the advocacy of people with disabilities in wheelchairs, but we all benefit from them. It is a classic example of when you get it right for those who have been rendered most vulnerable. You get it right for everybody, whether you're pushing a baby carriage, whether you're pulling a wagon, whether you're trying to catch a train. It is the impact of coming at it knowing we won't get to the all unless we really focus on those who've been kept behind. So Starsky, I am delighted to talk to you because you are the head of the Children's Defense Fund, which has always had a vision of our children being able to flourish. How are you feeling in this time that I'm trying to describe as being full of possibility?
No one can sit this close to you without being hopeful. So I feel hopeful. And in light of what you're sharing, that we haven't seen this. We both have some roots in Missouri. Langston Hughes is from Missouri. He wrote that America never was America to me. There is a gap between America, the idea, the ideal, the myth, the dream, and America, the nation, that is tied up in this concept, this hope of multiracial, flourishing democracy. And yet, when we focus on children and young people in this generation, the most diverse in American history, we see the potential for this kind of multi-ethnic, multiracial flourishing in their faces if we will stand our gaze long enough. And so I see hope in those young people and in this moment where we're speaking seriously about what democracy can and should be. And I think if we tweak our language a bit, we can all find hope in it. I don't know that democracy is to be restored or reclaimed, but an equity agenda would suggest it needs to be raised. Raised in this first multiracial, multicultural generation in America, raised in a manner that sees every one of these children without pushing any of them to the side, raised in a manner that honors that the marks of citizenship can be learned and taught, and that the purpose of our K-12 schools and their original mission was really to prepare people for the franchise, and that we are opening democracy in new ways across the country. And so I feel hopeful that we can make a commitment and begin to invest in new ways in a democracy to be raised in the faces and in the lifetime of these children, but also in their interest. I spend time in a lot of communities where democracy is a conversation about government. And democracy seems conceptual to some people who are highly intellectual, but if you make it government, in some places, my contact with government isn't quite as friendly in some of the neighborhoods I hang out in. And so that is to say, I may not care as much about democracy. So you have to answer the question, democracy for what? And for me, it's democracy for the joy that can be unleashed in the lives of children.
Say a bit more about the joy.
Yeah. So if our work is to unleash the joy in children, is to make sure they grow up with dignity, hope, and joy, if it is to make sure that they can dance like nobody's watching in the streets, to make sure they are seen and they are safe and they are secure, then we have a hope and a why for our democracy. And I think that hope and that why opens up a discussion in a new way. If they're going to sing and dance like nobody's watching, then those streets have to be safe and secure. And so their signature concern around gun violence that we hear in the report we're talking about today has to be addressed. And if they are going to feel good about themselves so that they can do that dancing and not pay attention to who may be critiquing, then we tend to their social and emotional wellness. So this is part of our work, and I think this is a great moment for us to invest in it.
I certainly agree with you, and you said a couple of things that I think are so important. You used hope several times. I remember one day that I was feeling really down because of a horrible thing that had happened in the country, and I had to give a speech. And I was sitting in the hotel room trying to get ready to give the speech. And you know the way people just send messages out? I just happened to look at my phone, and someone had sent me a message that said, "Hope is a discipline." Hope is a discipline. And it came from a woman named Miriam Kaba, who she lives by that. And so I thought about what that means. One, that it does take discipline to get up every day and have hope. But hope is a discipline in terms of getting the information that you need, in terms of finding out who's doing something about it and what are the elements that make it work, finding out how you can help and be part of the solution. And if you practice that discipline, it's not so hard to have the discipline of hope. Joy is similar in that sometimes when people hear about joy, they don't think of that as a work word. They think of that as an aspirational word, but you're talking about it as a work word.
Yes, I talk about it as a work word because that's the way I know child well-being is happening. I study the work. I focus on all the things. Yes, young people need to be provided for. We need to make sure harm does not come to them. We need to, in a global children's rights commitment, we need to make sure they have voice in the issues that impact them. But how do you know when the research is living its way out? Well, they smile, they sing, they dance. That joy, though, requires that we fulfill the responsibility to create the conditions for young people to thrive. I deeply enjoyed the video we saw earlier of Elmo in his tent. I mostly enjoy it because this is a thing that my children like to do. They like to carve out places in the basement and make up their tents. I enjoy helping to build the tent with them. That gives me joy because I know that they can be safe and they're having a good time and it's collaborative. But I recognize that it's my responsibility more than theirs. While they enjoy building the fort out of the blankets, it's actually my responsibility to create the conditions to build the environment where they can be safe. And I can only do that with my fellow grown-ups through public policy. I can only do that with my fellow grown-ups sustainably if we engage as citizens with the franchise. I can only do that if I'm willing to translate what is an articulated will to care for children in America into actual public policy to take care of children in America. And so I want us all to engage in that work together to make sure that our children are safe.
We have a hard time doing it, though. I was so pleased to hear Secretary Clinton really say directly that when we say all children, we have to mean those who are Black, those who are brown, those with disabilities, those who are living in circumstances that we want to turn away from because it's hard to look at. We have a difficult time as a nation being able to really lean into that all so that it ends up being something that can be misunderstood. You all have probably had the situation of saying all and having people interpret it as meaning you were only thinking about white children, that you were refusing to call out the Black and the brown. And we have the situation where people say all, and you advocate for the black and the brown children, and people say, you really only meant black and brown children. You really only meant children of color. You didn't mean all. How do we begin and sustain, not just begin, because the May of 2020 showed us we could begin. How do we begin and sustain a conversation about leaning into the greatest assets and treasures of this country, which have to do with the diversity, and making sure that we translate that into the public policy and then translate it into practice that allows all children to be able to reach their full potential and find their joy?
You're only asking the really easy questions today, I see. So a couple of things. I think we build muscles by doing really hard work together. We've learned the lessons. Many of us who engage in the advocacy space have been told for many years, well, prove that this works. Give me evidence that this works. So with the child tax credit, we now have a population level demonstration project that it works. But what we got to do is the hard work of sustaining these things. And part of how we do it is we focus on something that's eminently practical. We've had reference before of testing, and we understand that these things are on their way to a bigger idea. What do I mean? CDF works with the Center for the Study of Social Policy to chair a table called the Automatic Benefit for Children Coalition. We focus on a guaranteed benefit, a guaranteed basic income for children, or a universal child allowance. The expanded CTC is not that, but it's the closest we've ever come. And we've seen this project in other places. And so what we do is we study together where we've seen it work in other places. We translate practical opportunities and moments like we had in 2021 to demonstrate that it works to all people. And then we begin to build the public will, including socialization, not just in policy tables and summits, in conferences and convenings, but also in communities to talk about what actually works. Because it's harder to take a thing away than it is to get a thing in the first place. And so once we talk about what parents are doing with it, and we translate even those pictures into experiences of young people in communities, then we can make this thing work. So I love to tell the stories, my own stories. I have teenagers at my house, and so the refundability of the child tax credit matters because, when you got 3 teenage boys, you need resources to show up when the grocery bill shows up. And when you have children out of school in the summer, you need a place for them to go. And so one of the most significant things that people spent those on was out of school time programs. So children having access to swimming classes, swimming is a big thing in my area, having access to youth development and positive youth development programming, a place where they can be cared for, where they can be seen, where they can be safe, and where they can be secure. In those places, they get to smile, enjoy happiness, and exhibit joy. And if we understand that's the picture we're working for, then we can have a conversation about, whether there's too much going to in this deal, is there too much going to the corporations, or is there enough going to the children? Well, let's talk about how many kids are actually going to get to smile and swim this summer because we have access.
And make that important for everybody's life. Yeah. That even when you talk about it in the way that you've talked about it, I can imagine there are some for whom it is a yawn. Because while they may be happy that a few more kids are happy, I don't think it has anything to do with them. That we have to begin to tell ourselves a story in this country about how our fates are indeed intertwined more than they have ever been. One of the reasons that I really am optimistic about us being able to build this thriving multiracial democracy is because it is the only way that democracy survives. That democracy is tied now to being able to show that it can work across profound difference. Just as I also think, though it doesn't seem to have caught on, but I don't think that we're going to have a thriving economy if we don't invest in the people who will drive the economy. I mean, when I look at people who think that they're going to retire and do whatever, who's going to buy that home that you think has all this equity in it that you're going to pull out? It's the people who are having children, who now are building community, who are now starting their entrepreneurial activities. I am really just so in search of the language that is the aha moment for a nation. Because all I'm talking about is mining the treasure that is ours.
Yeah. It is indeed our treasure, and I think the way you've spoken of it is solid, and the way that we consider this legacy we have to turn people's attention away from themselves. I think this is part of the work. I believe in the hope-filled value of young people and their humanity and their dignity as whole human souls that we have responsibility to care for. I believe less in their vulnerability and more in their value. I believe we can call people to their better angels if we ask them to center on children. And part of this is not just because of the children, it is because we are better when we don't think of ourselves first anyway. Part of the challenge is for the way Niebuhr has us thinking about democracy. It is that it is all about self-interest. It is a negotiation of self-interest, when rather, when we put it in the context of community, it's really about thinking of the other. And I can think of no better other than my 8-year-old daughter. And I don't think my 8-year-old daughter is that much different than your granddaughter. And so in as much as that hope in that human soul, as much as that hope in the other and community can be projected in our children, I think this is the only way we get beyond ourselves, is to center them. And so they really are the hope for our democracy as well.
The hope for our democracy, thinking about others.
Okay.